Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing, where business leaders across the industry share their unique challenges and insights. Brought to you by Dazuki.
Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing. I'm your host, Brian Slee, and joining me today is Michael Muilenburg. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to chat today. You know, we've had many chats in the past, and this one's a little bit different. This is something that I think both of us have seen going on in the manufacturing industry for a while now, and you've got a particular area of expertise here that we're going to dig into. But I thought I'd open it up first with kind of laying out the problem statement. And this is something, again, that we're seeing a lot in manufacturing. Most manufacturers have an outdated org chart. And I don't mean that the org chart's outdated and, Tom left the company 2 years ago and the org chart hasn't been updated. What I mean is the company, the way it's structured, it's not really designed for the pace of innovation that we're seeing in manufacturing. And I think, if you look at a lot of manufacturers, IT is still the main department that either evaluates or helps evaluate new technologies. And you really just don't have this dedicated team to evaluate new solutions that are coming into the market. And one of the things that we often see from this is, it's really a lack of a cohesive digital strategy. And I know, Michael, you've heard this term a lot, but it results in a lot of pilots, and you get stuck in pilot purgatory. No one really feels confident making decisions about, which investments to make, what solutions to move forward with, because again, there's just really a lacking cohesive strategy. So let's jump into this, Michael. Why doesn't this approach work? What are some of the challenges when you have, IT, which is responsible for so much these days, in charge of kind of leading the evaluation or, being heavily involved in the evaluation of new technologies?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting observation there. Innovation is often part of how you develop products, and some companies have, laboratories working on stuff that's maybe a little further out. And the expectation in those organizations is a constant state of experimentation and scouting, and and really coming up with unique solutions. And we don't see that as much in manufacturing. We see tried and true methodologies and tools, but it's maybe not in vogue to be innovative in that way in manufacturing and even supply chain for that matter. And then what happens is other parts of the organization end up bearing some of that burden, like you mentioned, IT or some of the other support services. They're left to drive the innovation, which is really separated from what happens on the shop floor. And so our approach has been lately to really understand what's happening on the shop floor, define the problem, understand what's really going on in people's heads and their daily lives, and innovate around that, and just pull out all the stops. Let's bring the best and the greatest to our shop floor.
Yeah, let's back that up a little bit there. So, as you're saying, the it's not a burden, but the work falls on other departments. So who, in a lot of these manufacturing companies, who is typically doing the scouting then if you don't have a dedicated team and, IT just doesn't have the bandwidth or the resources to do it? What are you typically seeing in manufacturer from manufacturers when it comes to the scouting part of it?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I think IT often takes a strong role there, and anything that's digital goes through them, and they would manage the scouting and the qualification and even the deployment. And again, not to pick on my IT friends, but sometimes we're chasing a digital solution and there's no problem behind it, or we're solving the wrong problem. And so, how do you create alignment between the work that's being done, the problem that you're facing, and this wonderful area of digitization and innovation in that space? And we've sort of bridged that gap with what started out as sort of a lean team, lean engineers looking at efficiency and optimization, but more importantly, looking at the culture and looking at the employee experience. And so our team has been built around bridging that gap, understanding the needs of the shop floor, the culture of the shop floor, the way that you would introduce new technology, the change management process, And then we certainly partner with IT and quality and human resources and even communications lately, um, to build kind of a package that we can promote and sell and really make it go from pilot to deployment a lot smoother. So it really has to be a cross-functional team to get the work done, but it's initiated by what we call an operational technology team, technology that's focused on helping operations, improve their work.
So, Michael, what's interesting to me is that you guys evolved from kind of a lean group into what you are now, which is a dedicated team. With the intent, I guess the purpose behind your team is really to evaluate these new technologies. For a lot of companies, they don't have the ability to evolve. They're already behind. They need to get a team in place now. What does it look like to build out a dedicated team for this? What type of people are you looking for? How do you structure the team to make sure that you're focused on the right initiatives and you have a cohesive strategy?
Yeah, I think in many organizations you'll find industrial engineers, process engineers with different backgrounds, trying to solve that efficiency, productivity kind of problem, and falling back on traditional lean methods and lean tools, and that's absolutely fantastic. That you got to do that. But I think when you turn the corner and they start asking the question, what's really state of the art? What's new in lean? What's new in um, technology that can support operations? And we're not talking about automation and robots and 3D printing. I mean, obviously those are new technologies as well, but we're talking about technologies that can actually support the operator. Around predictive analytics, around training, onboarding, around just even an alert system to let them know when things aren't running well early on, so they can head it off. So you really have to shift that mindset, and I think that's a leadership thing, that they have to ask their people, hey, where's the innovation here? What's new? What is state of the art? What have you seen? What's your vision? I use the phrase a lot, Brian. You've heard me say this. Wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be great if we could do this or that? And that mindset starts with that phrase. And then I think you have to just carve out some time and say, I'm going to dedicate X number of hours to that process. The scouting, the evaluation, the matching the solution with the problem, and exploring a little bit, even before you get into that pilot and deployment phase. You just have to carve out some time. And at 3M, we often call it 15% time. We can apply 15% of our time to solving problems and exploring. And I don't know whether it's actually 5 or 10 or 15 or 20. I think it depends on your role. But adopting that sort of a mindset, giving some of your existing team the time and bandwidth to go do a little bit of that. And if it starts catching on, maybe it needs to be 50%, or maybe it needs to be a full-time FTE. And maybe it'll develop into a team over time like ours did.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm hearing here, the challenge I could imagine for a company that doesn't have a dedicated team, a lot of manufacturers don't. A lot of companies, engineering is bringing in solutions, trainings departments bringing in different solutions. You have solutions coming from all these different departments. And what I heard from you a minute ago was that you have to be solving a problem. It has to start with a problem. How do you get alignment throughout the organization or throughout these various departments on which problems you should be looking to solve first and which problems you should be looking to solve with technology? Is there, a way to kind of have a cohesive strategy or to begin developing that for the organization?
Yeah, wow, that's a complicated question. A couple different angles on that. One is, yeah, you do need to have a problem identification and really digging into the facts and the what's the potential benefit, and you really have to have that kind of built into anything that you do. I think the more complicated thing that you brought up is ideas coming from different areas of the company. Who coordinates that, who evaluates it, who synergizes it, who moves it forward. An operator may generate an idea. They saw something on television last night that might help them in their daily work. Who do they tell? Who acts on that? IT or HR, they may be pushing a certain solution, but are they really, gathering that cross-functional input that we talked about? And I think what we're learning, and we're still learning, is how do you build that process so that you capture those voices, those ideas, those observations, and get it into some sort of pipeline where you can say, "Hey, that's a great idea. We'll get to that eventually," or "Boy, that's a great idea. You should talk to so and so, and maybe build it out a little more, and we should move that forward because that seems to fit with where we're going." You don't want to say flat no. You want to be able to say, "I need more information. Maybe the timing isn't the best. Maybe we need to build a case and get some resources." But we have I would say, a pretty simple process that we use. It's getting more complicated because we're getting more input, more voices,
Yeah.
more ideas coming across our desk, and it honestly is hard to keep up with the state of technology, innovation, and just creative people in our organization.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the problems, kind of trying to understand how do you get alignment on which problems to solve? How do you identify problems? It sounds like what you're saying there is a lot of these problems you become aware of when various people are presenting solutions to you. They're presenting a solution because they've identified a problem in their role that maybe other people haven't seen. So that seems like one way to identify problems. And then it's also one way to identify solutions. And then the real challenge, it sounds like, becomes, okay, which ones do we focus on? And
Yeah,
I'm wondering,
absolutely.
is there a framework, or what have you seen as maybe a best practice? Because at different levels of the organization, everybody's got different levels of priorities. And often what I see is those, different levels of priorities, or everyone has different priorities. It's hard to get alignment on which projects to focus on. And so what are some ways that you guys have kind of worked through that? Because you've had to have had these challenges before. I know you guys have taken on some big projects. How did you make that decision to commit?
Well, yeah, and I had the advantage. Over the last number of years, I've worked closely with the strategic planning team. I've actually led our strategic planning process, so I hear firsthand from our operations people what their pain is, and their strategies for overcoming that, any ideas they might have, their timelines. I think more and more we're getting ideas coming out of the woodwork. People say, "Oh, there's a group listening. I'll just make a suggestion. I don't even need to go through strat planning." So it's combining those two efforts. Something that's a little more formal, more strategic versus just random observations and really good ideas. And yeah, sometimes the priority is based on a willing participant. They have a problem. They volunteer to be the pilot. We say, well, we'll try it with you, and if it's successful, other people will hear about it, and they may elevate it in their priority list and say, well, we want to deploy that too, because yeah, we really had that problem, but maybe we haven't talked about it enough. But we really like that solution, and we can replicate that very quickly. That happened with our training and onboarding. We started with a very small group of people. We knew it was a widespread problem, but one or two sites picked it up early, and the others heard about it, and they said, "Oh, well, we have that problem too, and we really like that solution. Can we get involved? Can we become part of the next wave?"
Got it. And that in that situation, that's something where you have this problem that you believe is probably a problem being experienced throughout the company, but maybe it hasn't been identified at a higher level where the company is throwing resources at solving that problem just yet. And so your team, it sounds like you guys are really um, providing resources and guidance. Is that right, for these individual plants or groups to evaluate these technologies?
Yeah, I think we do a fair amount of just having dialogue, trying to understand the problem. We ask a lot of questions um, to define it, to find maybe the root cause, or maybe multiple root causes to a symptom that we're observing. And even I'll speak specifically about training, onboarding, and improvement. Uh, I think that was a well-known opportunity. Everybody said we can be better at these areas, but when we started looking at the specifics, the complexity of the equipment, people changing jobs, rapid growth, adding new people to an organization and having to get them up to speed very quickly. Obviously, safety comes to mind. We want our people to be really, really, really safe. And we just thought that there has to be a better way to communicate the safety message, the protective equipment, the practices that are going to keep them safe in the workplace. And then there's the cross training element. People want to grow, they want to learn, and that need wasn't really articulated. But if you talk to anybody individually and talk about their career path, that would often come up. And so you start molding all those things together, and your problem statement is really, I need a system for rapidly training, keeping up with the pace of technology, with people changes, focused on safety, focused on improvement, and it's got to be fast. It's got to be lightning fast. It's got to be accessible. All these other requirements started building out, and it took a while to get our head around that particular problem statement and all those subtle little things that were going on. It's not just a training issue. It's
Yeah.
much bigger than that.
Yeah, and this is a really good example because it's such a complicated. I know training's oftentimes one of those areas where it's hard to justify investments in that area because it's hard to calculate the ROI on it. It sounds like your team was really helpful in helping these groups build out that business case, that problem statement, um, and get this project moving forward. Um, I guess my question here is, what happens if your group doesn't exist in this situation? Then what have you seen from other companies? If there's no dedicated team and you've got this widespread problem, who's who's helping these groups move these things forward? Um,
Yeah, I see a lot of examples where you'll find a champion, an individual that has a great idea and they want to push something forward, and they're relying on their skills to sell the idea, to do the justification, and maybe even help with the pilot and deployment. Maybe it's not even their full time job, and so it's an uphill battle. I feel sorry for the people that are isolated like that. Some of them are very gifted at it, and they're it's just how they work and they get it done. But it's so much better when you've got a cross-functional team. You've got some dedicated resources that actually have the time to put into these things and ask those questions, do the foundational work, follow the process, run an experiment, have it fail miserably, and then go back and say, how can we do that better? And so again,
yeah,
it's been a great experience to build the team and build those skills and build the process. My advice is you just got to start and start small and take it away from that individual champion that's going to get stressed out by trying to do everything themselves. Give them some help. Give them a lifeline.
yeah, because on one hand you've got a really probably motivated employee that you don't want to overburden with another project. um, and so like you're saying, you need to pull that away from them. On the other hand, that might be a great person to pull into a role like this, as we're
Mhm.
talking about. This could be someone that you could start building a team around that's really motivated and interested in new technology solutions. So why don't we transition to that topic? So if I'm a medium size manufacturer, I don't have a dedicated team in place. We've got some innovation going on in pockets of the organization. It's an individual here, individual here. Um, how do you get started with building out this team? What's kind of some practical tips that we can share with the audience on, what's the first step to getting started and really having maybe a dedicated person or dedicated team to get started?
Yeah, well, Brian, I think it starts with leadership, and I know that might sound a little cliche, but having a top leader, maybe it's a director, VP, CEO. Maybe it's you, maybe it's one of our listeners, to take on that role as that champion, to kind of cast the vision and say it's okay to innovate in operations, and we're gonna take this seriously, and we're gonna move toward um, this move down this innovation path. When it comes to the team, you've got these individuals in your organization that are already coming up with ideas and trying to move things forward. I like to use the tipping point model. When I built my team, I started looking for people that followed Malcolm Gladwell's law of the few, which is the maven, the connector, and the salesman. So I needed a maven that really knew all the details of the technology, was well read, was connected with vendors, had all this trivia, all this information in their head about potential solutions. I really needed a connector, somebody to connect to the resource groups, to connect to the shop floor, to be able to have a conversation with VPs on one hand and shop floor people on the other. And then finally, I needed salesmen. I needed somebody that can go out and just pitch the solution, talk about the justification, the savings, and really convince people that we're not just selling technology, we're really solving a problem. And so you put those three together, and you've really got a powerful force for change. And we sit in a room. My team sits in a room and says, "How are we going to knock out those different things?" Um, and it's our full time job, of course. But if you even had somebody that's doing that a couple hours a week with those rare gifts, and applying those gifts to this solution, I think you'll be able to move things forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's really interesting the way you thought about building out a team and what characteristics you were looking for. Because I think one of the things, from the companies I have seen that do have maybe not a team that's dedicated to this, but they're starting to build it out, they've oftentimes are looking for somebody who, has experience with technology. And I think a lot of times I see companies that are overemphasizing that experience with technology. So maybe they worked previously for a software company, or maybe they came up through IT. But it seems like one of the challenges there is you're missing out on having any manufacturing experience. You haven't actually been on the shop floor. Kind of, you were talking about you know, the salesman. You need to have that person who can go in and connect with people on the shop floor and the VPs. And so I guess my question here is, if you can only hire one person, to start this team out, what's the most important, characteristic or most important background that you're looking for?
Well, according to Malcolm Gladwell, there is no most important one. You got to have all three if you're going to
You
create
got to have all.
a tipping point. My experience is that the connector is really the one that has to be firing on all cylinders. Connecting the solution to the people, connecting the people to the people, getting the word out, and letting them know, what's available. And hey, you should talk to so and so, and you should meet so and so, and they can help you, and really introducing all the interested parties to one another and sort of bridging that gap. I think that's the glue that holds it all together.
Got it. And when you mention that, the first kind of role that comes to mind is, someone who's got that continuous improvement background. Has maybe been in a CI role before and has already been working with various plants and various folks throughout the organization. Is that like the type of person that you would have in mind for maybe that first kind of hire?
Yeah, I think that's an important set of skills. That experience, moving ideas through the organization as a CI person is definitely one of those skills. I also, if I would look to the person and say, have they led a team? Have they been part of either leading a technical group, or maybe more importantly, leading a shift, being a shift supervisor, a shift lead, a general supervisor, because they're managing, both the hitting the output, hitting the targets, being very conscientious about meeting the goals of the day, as well as dealing with the people side, listening and scheduling people and onboarding them. And so I think that's a great group of skills to have as well. Usually comes out of being a shift supervisor.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's go back just for a minute here, because I think this is maybe one point that I think a lot of people in the audience are going to be. This is going to be the most challenging point. How do you get management on board? As you said, management has to buy into this. They have to have a vision. But I see it a lot where a lot of management teams are so focused on the day to day that they're not thinking long term, and they're not thinking about the future vision. Where do we want to be, in 3, 4, 5 years from now? What technologies are going to enable us to get to where we want to be? They're not thinking that way. They're, again, very day to day focused. So how does somebody who maybe is that person who wants to see more change at the company and is really motivated to drive that change? How do they go about getting management on board, and getting management to at least consider developing this type of team or position?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different approaches there. One, seeking out higher level support. Finding that visionary leader. If it's not obvious who they are, you may have to go find them and introduce yourself. Talk about the things you're working on. Try to get them excited about this area of innovation and operations. You may or may not find that person in your organization. I think they're there. You may have to coax it out of them a little bit. The second thing is, I mean, this is going to sound very much, like an engineering approach, but having your benefits quantified, being able to measure the benefits and articulate that, just tell me what the benefit to the organization is. Give me an example. Give me some numbers. Easier said than done, but the more of that you can build, whether it be intangible or tangible savings, as the promoter, as the leader of this effort, you really have to have that at your fingertips. But I think the most important of these, so if you have a sponsor and an upper management leader, that's great. If you've got numbers and savings and benefit, yes, that's great. What we found is if you go right to the shop floor and you pilot a solution and you get somebody excited, and you get them engaged in the process, and you just listen to their reaction. And when you hear people say, "Man, this is really helpful. I never thought I'd see this," or "This is fun. I can't believe this is fun, but this is really fun. I'm excited to be part of this, this pilot of this new technology." And then you bring those quotes, those reactions from the shop floor back to your leadership team, and you said, "This is what people are saying." Now we're talking about employee, engagement, commitment, excitement. It's beyond the numbers. It's beyond, a mandate. It's saying, no, the people really, really want this, and they've seen the benefit, and boy, they're excited to participate too. They don't feel like it's being done to them. They want to be part of the solution. They want to get involved. And that's what we've really found. When you get that going and you bring those voices to the leadership team, it catches people, it gets their attention.
Wow, this is a great breakdown, and I'm just going to recap real quick here. You've got to build essentially your business case. What's the impact of a solution like this on the company, whether it's a cost savings or ability to increase production or whatever it might be. You got to build your business case, so you got to be good at that. But then this other part, which it seems kind of nuanced, is getting the people on the shop floor excited about it, and being able to take their excitement and share it with upper management. What's like a tactical way to do that? Is it just like sharing quotes? Are you like recording videos? Like, how do you go about taking that excitement and really transferring it to the management team so they can actually see it firsthand?
Well, it definitely starts with the salesman on my team who can talk to anybody and bring forth the numbers and the quotes and all that information secondhand. But you hit on a couple points. We have made little testimonial videos. We've done some interviews and gotten video quotes, and we embed that in our presentations. Say here's what they're saying, and we just play it. The best example I can think of is we actually brought a couple of vice presidents to the shop floor, and we had a couple of users demonstrate a solution. By the way, these users didn't even have a lot of experience. They felt like they were a little bit put on the spot. They weren't super confident, but they're like, we like it, we want to learn more, and we'll happily share our thoughts on this and demonstrate how the technology was being used. That was a powerful moment. Those leaders walked away saying, boy, we just saw this in action. We saw the reaction. We saw the smile on their face. And we can do the math, and we can figure out the benefit in our head. But what we took away from it was just this wave of enthusiasm and excitement about this technology. We really are solving the problem.
Yeah, no, I think that last point there, actually getting management on the shop floor to see firsthand, that definitely seems like the most compelling way to get them involved and get them on board with the project. Well, going from here, I think just kind of wrap it up. You guys obviously have a dedicated team for this. You've seen the benefits. We've talked a little bit about how do you get management on board? How do you go about developing this team? What are the characteristics you're looking for in the people that you're hiring? From your perspective, though, you've been doing this for a while. What has been the impact for you at 3M? What you guys have had this team in place. Technology is innovating at an incredibly fast pace. What's been the benefit for you guys so far at 3M?
But I think early on, we saw the business benefit. It wasn't it wasn't just intangible. We saw improvements in productivity and yield and rate and maybe even just stability in our processes. We observed that early on with multiple technologies. Whether it be training and onboarding, whether it be sensors and real time feedback on a new piece of equipment, whether it be even some of the autonomous work that we've done, having operators doing some of the maintenance on their own lines, and not really fixing, repairing, or complete overhauls, but just checks and small things that they can do to keep the line running in tip top shape, and empowering them to do that. So we saw benefits right away. Sometimes hard to put a number on it, but we knew directionally we were going the right way. A thing we also learned early on is that rarely does any innovation or technology solution kind of work on its own. And so we felt like we had to combine sort of a methodology, a way of working with this new tool, this new cool thing, with some sort of follow up, feedback mechanism. You know, the solution is not the final solution. It's just a step in the right direction, and that improvement process was really important. And so again, a side benefit, measurable or not, is how fast is your improvement cycle. If you start connecting a way of work with a technology, and then you give the users a way to improve it every day, you can measure that cycle of improvement. We had one case where we measured 200 improvements in 180 days,
Wow.
and that's no small feat. That lit up our continuous improvement engine, and it wasn't just one solution. It was them looking at a variety of things and combining them and saying, well, I can make that better, and we can add to this, and we can take that away, and ultimately it's gonna deliver a better value. And so we let the system evolve, with those improvement suggestions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the other, question I have for you then is, as time has gone on, you guys have obviously probably gotten better at evaluating technologies, implementing technologies. Are you guys at the point now where, you're implementing at a speed that's, much faster than previously because you have so much experience now and rolling solutions out to the shop floor?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. Do you feel like you can accelerate this process? And you have a couple wins under your belt, and you say, okay, now I can conquer the world. I can move really really fast. And
Yeah.
and yet, in the reality is you have to move at the pace that the organization is willing to change, and maybe temper that enthusiasm a little bit. And it's also maybe I don't know how to say this. It would be easy to get caught up into the thought that you can evaluate stuff very quickly without a lot of effort. And there's some bias there. I think you think you know it, you think you've seen it all. Let's just pick the winner and let's move forward. And that's not the case. So I think we force ourselves to slow down, take a deep breath. Let's really dig into this. Let's complete the evaluation. Let's dig into the details, and not jump to conclusions or just assume. And so that's again a word of advice to myself and my team. Sometimes you got to go slow to go fast.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great quote. I think I heard that in one of those kids' movies, Cars, or something like that.
I think that's where it came from. Yeah.
well, no, this has been great, Michael. And I think, you're really well connected in the manufacturing industry. And, as we wrap up here, any resources or organizations that you want to share with the listeners that, you think they should be connecting to, or at least be looking into?
Well, obviously, there's historically there's vendor shows, there's technology expos, conferences, and certainly that's changed a lot since the pandemic. But that's a great place to look for information, and get names and get demos going and stuff. And that hasn't really changed. What I've found is, find a local peer group, find other manufacturers in your area that you can network with, partner with, share information, non-compete situations. We have a great one here in the Twin Cities, that represents, I think, almost 500 companies. And so I got involved in that several years ago, and I just learn every time I talk to these people, and keeps me very open-minded. It gives me kind of a help chain. So that's one thing. Find your local manufacturing consortium within arm's reach. And then on a national level, there's several organizations. There's lean conferences, there's manufacturing conferences, and you can Google top manufacturing conferences, and they're all good. They all offer something for you as you're undertaking this process. I've been working with AME for a couple of years. So that's the Association of Manufacturing Excellence. And they're one of the biggest organizations, and they go from just good old-fashioned lean to some of the technology and innovation stuff as well. So I think you get broad exposure to lots of good information, world-class thought leaders, and companies that may be on the same journey as you. Maybe they're even just one step ahead, and that gives you an opportunity to connect with them as well. So that's definitely you got to look outside your own sandbox. You gotta go experience it, go see. If you can get a factory tour, if you can talk to their teams, their operators, it's going to kind of help give you the confidence, get your own effort underway.
Yeah, I love that tip, by the way. Find somebody who's one step ahead of you. They've already
Mm-hmm.
kind of made the mistakes that you'd have to make if you went out on your own. I think that's a really great tip. Well, Michael, thank you for joining us today. I think this is a really helpful episode, and hopefully get some of our audience members to maybe rethink how the organization is structured, how they're evaluating new technologies. So thank you for your time today, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Always an engaging conversation. I love discussing these topics with you and the team. So thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for listening to the Voices of Manufacturing, brought to you by Dazuki. To stay up to date, subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit dazuki.com/podcast to learn more.